Today we will be learning all about carbohydrates. So today's learning outcomes, we're just going to have kind of an introduction to carbohydrates to understand their structure and function. We'll learn some vocabulary, aldose, ketose, pyranose, furanose. We'll be able to recognize some of the different structures and isomers of carbs, epimers and anomers. And we'll focus at the end there on the anomeric carbon, understanding its configuration, and in particular, how to form various glycosidic bonds from the anomeric carbon. Today's Meet a Scientist moment is Carolyn Bertozzi. She is a professor of chemistry at Stanford. She came out as lesbian in the 1980s, which is early enough, folks, that it could have negatively impacted her career trajectory and prevented her hire and promotion at the time. However, it really hasn't hindered her. She is a very recent Nobel Prize winner in chemistry in 2022. Her research has to do with cell surface glycosylation, so attaching carbohydrates to cells and understanding how those carbohydrates play a role in disease, particularly cancer and infection. So I'm going to start off today's videos with kind of just some basic vocab-based stuff. This is not a huge emphasis. The later videos will be greater emphasized. Carbohydrates are incredibly abundant. They are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and you'll really be able to identify a carbohydrate because it has, it has many hydroxyl functional groups. So what you're really going to be seeing is like a bunch of carbons with a bunch of hydroxyls coming off of them. Some vocab for us: a single monomer we would call monosaccharide or just a sugar. They can have different numbers of carbons, different types of arrangements, etc. A polymer of a carbohydrate would be called a polysaccharide. And carbohydrates have a variety of functions, of course important in metabolism. We will focus on the breakdown of sugar towards the end of this course. They also have structural roles, particularly from plants, such as cellulose. But for our bodies, they have a variety of important roles as well. Protein folding, cellular recognition, and we will not have time to get into that in this class. All sugars, when it comes down to it, can be classified either as an aldose or a ketose. And so this depends on if the linear version of the sugar has an aldehyde functional group or a ketone functional group. If it's an aldehyde, like kind of shown on this slide, it's an aldose. If it's a ketone, ketose. Additionally, we know that not only that carbonyl carbon could be different, but all the carbons attached to those hydroxyls could be different. And so, for example, glucose is a very important sugar. 4 of the 6 carbons in glucose are chiral centers. Glucose has many epimers. So an epimer will be different from glucose about a single chiral carbon only. So for example, glucose and mannose are different because of their configuration at carbon 2. Glucose and galactose are different because of their configuration about carbon 4. In this class, we're going to have to be comfortable looking at sugars not only in their linear form, but actually more often in their cyclic form. And so you learned the reaction that happens to cyclize sugars in organic chemistry. You probably recall acetal, hemiacetal reactions. That is the reaction performed to cyclize a sugar. And this reaction, while it will happen only slowly in aqueous solution, will happen pretty quickly in the body because it can be mediated by enzymes. And so if we are kind of converting these linear structures to cyclic structures, you might imagine we could have a 5-membered ring or a 6-membered ring. And so this kind of rounds out the first part of just like vocabulary for today's videos. We can have 6-membered rings based on a pyran ring. We call those pyranose. Or a 5-membered ring based on a furan ring called a furanose. And while a lot of the pictures we will look at today look kind of flat, I'm just going to remind us that, for example, a 6-membered ring, we know it's not flat, right? You drew chair poses, probably a lot in organic chemistry. So just keep in mind that these rings do have 3-dimensionality and they are kind of chair pose, not flat rings. Next up, we'll dive into more of the focus of the series of videos, anomers and the anomeric carbon.